Very good afternoon. Warm greetings from the Pacific. Bulavina ka kia ora, Excellency, for joining all of us. Malo, Minister. It's really wonderful to have a great uh, connecting together again to this very special side event. This side event is to really mark the launch of the special issue of the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal, the issue of this May 2024. We're focusing on sustainable development in Pacific smaller and developing states, the role of regional commission. As you may know, that this particular journal is really an interface as to how we bring the policymakers and the academics and the think tanks and the thinkers as well all together in one space. So this really provides an important opportunity. And importantly, I think this was the first time that our journal is really focusing on the Pacific as such. So this is a very unique opportunity to really showcase as to how we're coming and bringing the voice of Pacific in the conversation at the ESCAP platform. With that, this is my distinct pleasure to invite our Executive Secretary, Ms. Armida Salis Jabana, to give the welcome remarks. Armida, over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Sudip. A very warm welcome. Also, good afternoon. I would like to, first of all, recognize the presence of Excellency Mr. Henry Puna, Secretary General of PIFS, to Professor Rukmani Gounder, the guest editor of this special theme edition, which I understand is connecting online, as well as to Professor Anis Chowdhury, Pak Anis, who is the managing editor of this journal, who is also connecting online from Australia. I also would like to recognize the presence of Madam Fekita, my dear friend, Minister from Tonga, as well as Excellency Madam Lenora, also becoming also a good friend, Assistant Minister of Fiji, Excellencies Ambassadors, as well as dear participants. Again, it is indeed my pleasure to join you today for the launch of this new issue of the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal for 2024. And actually, this is a special issue here because it focuses on the Pacific. And this special issue comes out at the completion of the third 10-year program of action, which for the SIDS, which is the Samoa Pathway, and of course, just a few weeks before the SIDS 4 to be convened in Antigua Barbuda, in which I think majority of us will be there. So I'm therefore very delighted that we have today a distinguished panel of expert senior policymakers from the Pacific SIDS. I think some will join online, of course, while the guest editor, Professor Rukmani Gounder, will summarize the main findings of the articles. I just highlight a few pressing sustainable development issues that would benefit from regional cooperation. Of course, we understand the lack of scale and remoteness of the Pacific SIDS limit their capacity for many of economic activities, especially structural transformation, industrialization, and so on, which makes these economies extremely vulnerable to global economic uncertainty and all these challenges, not to mention, of course, the climate impact. So therefore, with this unique ecology and fragility of the Pacific SIDS demands a balanced approach to develop their economy further, as well as to manage their resources, so as not to overexploit, for example, in the fishing and so on. Climate change, of course, everybody already, especially colleagues from Pacific, consistently raise their voice on the fragility of the Pacific SIDS, while some solutions are emerging, including the early warning system, which can mitigate some of the risks, not only some, but still, we need the overall solution, global, regional, as well as a specific country level. The other, I think also longstanding and consistently being voiced and being not only discussed, deliberated, but Pacific SIDS actively, try to have, this more finance, transfer technology, assistance, collaboration, and so on, yeah, to combat the impact of climate change. So therefore, yeah, regional cooperation is essential, is vital, is key, not only to make the voices heard, yeah, effectively, also being addressed, but also how to come up with solutions. So therefore, we are very pleased, yeah, as ESCAP, as Regional Commission, to contribute as well as to work with all of you, including looking forward to the SITS-4 outcome, as well as its implementation. In closing, let me once again extend our appreciation and deep gratitude to all of you, distinguished panelists, including contributors, to the journal and all those involved in bringing out this excellent publication. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Warmida, for giving the welcome and launch this particular issue. This is my distinct pleasure and honor to request His Excellency Mr. Henry Puno, the Secretary General Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, to give his special remarks to mark this occasion. Excellency, over to you, please.
Thank you, moderator. And the Secretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Ms. Amira Ali Shabana, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, our special guests and panelists and contributors who are joining us online. A very good afternoon and warm Pacific greetings to you all. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. And may I just offer at the outset my commendation to ESCAP for the release of this issue of the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal dedicated to Pacific Island the Pacific Small Island Developing States. As we continue to explore the insights and contributions of the newly launched journal, I note that the publication not only deepens our understanding of sustainable development within our region, but also serves as a catalyst for advancing our collective vision for a resilient and prosperous Blue Pacific continent. Our 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent underscores our unwavering commitment to safeguarding our environment, enhancing our economic stability, and ensuring social inclusiveness. The thematic areas highlighted within our strategy, ranging from people-centered development to climate change and disasters, to resources and economic development, are intricately connected to the Sustainable Development Goals discussed within the journal. This journal, with its analyses and policy recommendations, can also support the strategic direction of our Blue Pacific region by contributing to the knowledge base that empowers us to act decisively and collaboratively. For instance, its focus on innovative economic policies can help inform our regional efforts to enhance economic resilience and sustainability, echoing our 2050 strategy's call for strengthened economic development that benefits all Pacific peoples. Moreover, the journal's emphasis on technological advancement and environmental protection can also support our commitments to leverage technology for sustainable development and to meticulously manage our oceanic and terrestrial resources. These are not just regional priorities, but global imperatives that the journal helps bring to the forefront, reminding us of the urgent need for action and cooperation. In essence, the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal is not merely a collection of articles and should not be treated as such, but rather it should be viewed as a resource to guide our collective efforts. It challenges us to think critically and to act collectively as we strive towards a future where every Pacific Islander leads a life marked by dignity, peace, and opportunity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we deliberate on the path forward, let us draw on the rich insights from this journal. Let us strengthen our resolve to work together under the 2050 strategy, ensuring that our actions today will forge a sustainable and resilient tomorrow for the Blue Pacific continent. I thank you very much for your commitment, for your vision, and for your partnership as we continue this important journey together. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, SG, as always, inspiring us with your remarks. And thank you so much also, to work together for the last few years in this endeavor. Now, I'm going to request Professor Rukmini Gaunda, Massachusetts University, New Zealand, and the guest editor of the Special Pacific Theme of the Journal 2024 for an overview presentation. So, Professor Gaunda, over to you.
Thank you very much. Nisambula Vinaka, and warm greetings, Pacific greetings to you all. Kop Kun Ka. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing it correctly from the terms of using the Thai language. And I'm very happy to join you all to discuss these very important issues related to sustainable development journals, the Asia Pacific Development Journal that brought out the issue related to sustainable development and economic growth issues in the Pacific Islands developing state. And what is key important within that perspective is the role of regional cooperation as well. So based on that, we had a call for the papers, and we were linking it in terms of how to address many of these issues. So when Anis approached me in relation to this particular perspective, I believe we all jumped to the issue of how important they are. And particularly for the Pacific Islands to be given the priority of speaking their own issues, the problems, but what the Pacific Islands were facing in that matter, in those perspective as well. So I think this journal's two editions, which we will be bringing, given that we did not realize that that's the overwhelming response we would get from the various institutions. So based on that, we were linking onto other perspective as well. So thank you for the opportunity, and I am very happy to give you some overview related to that. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first one, which we're looking at the research linkages in the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal. We already know that basically the UN ESCAP has a very significant focus on the Pacific Island countries in terms of socioeconomic development and the perspective related in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goal as well. In this perspective, also, the key focus that many of these papers that when we talked about in terms of call for papers, we're looking at the regional impact of climate change, particularly to improve the economic growth, and also relating it to improve the socioeconomic development of the nations, particularly given the small island nations. And of course, we are impacted by the climate change. And of course, many of the small nations are talking about their livelihood and also the long-term standard of living of the people as well. So not only we are worried about small island nations like Kiribati and others, talking about this more passionately, but I think the UN ESCAP is also playing a very important role in bringing these particular issues of the impact of climate change, and particularly how these are going to impact the economic growth and also the socio-economic development as well. So when we talk about economic growth and sustainable development, particularly the economic socioeconomic development, we're talking about exactly in terms of how do we improve their well-being and livelihood of the people as well. So some of the papers related to that also have talked about these particular issues and how the regional cooperation and integration can address the sustainable development challenges. Now, we know that the World Bank, the IMF, the UN ESCAP, and Pacific Island Forum Secretariat and also individual governments of the Pacific Island countries are talking about these particular issues. And I think it is very timely that we have managed to focus that, particularly for the Pacific Islands, where many of the institutions of the Pacific Islands researchers have contributed to that. So within this particular concept of climate change, economic growth and socioeconomic development, and also linking it to the regional cooperation and integration to address the sustainable development goal, the key focus, which we have also tried to focus in this series of publications, are basically the importance of economic research and the policymakers' relationship. I think it's not just about any institution that can work in isolation. And the moment we start to do that, that's where the disjoint between the nations, the people, and the international organizations tend to be a adverse impact on the overall well-being, and particularly to meet the sustainable development goals. So I think within these issues that we are talking about, in terms of climate change, economic growth, socioeconomic development, regional cooperation, the focus should bring the importance of economic research into light, along with the policy makers, in terms of the relationship, to understand what are the key issues, what are those policy, and particularly the analysis from these papers that which I will talk about will show clearly the importance of why these findings are so important, linking that to the policymakers' relationship. And I think that institutions like the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, all those, along with the PIFS, Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, and all of this will become a very important part in linking this to the policymakers' relationship with the actual current research. So this set of publications and the issues that we are bringing in the first part are really very crucial, is also the second issue of the journal as well. Next slide, thank you. Okay, so in talking to you about in terms of looking at the academic research and the policymakers' vital relationship, I think this is the key important perspective of understanding that one cannot, and nobody can do things in isolation and forget the linkages that we need between academic research and policymakers. So I think academic research is utterly valuable to provide that specific requirements for the policymakers. And so based on the actual analysis of what the academics do, which we feel very passionate about, and also to bring that in light to the policymakers, whether they are the governments around the Pacific Islands, or the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, or the UN ESCAP that is there, which talks at a bigger table with the World Bank, IMF, and the rest of them, the UN organizations as well, to bring our issues to them in light to show about that. So I think academic research is very important to bring good policy implications based on the analytical perspective of to make the research policymakers conduct to deliver the policy guidance on a nation and the region, and also in terms of the global policy implications as well. So I think within that perspective, the role of the international organization, particularly those World Bank, IMF, even the bilateral aid agencies and PIFs and others, could assist in terms of economic and social perspective with financial implications on those particular islands. And so the link between this policy guidance in the region and the global policy implementations are absolutely vital. It should not be in isolation, but it should be in combination with all organizations to address that, because I think unless we hear the voices of the Pacific, we will not be able to address most of these issues, as most of them are usually forgotten unless they are brought in picture with the real issues of the people as well. So if we look at the academic research and the policymakers' relationship, I think it is not just the short term that we have talked about these issues and then it should be forgotten, but it is the long term and the global, regional, and national level issues that need to be talked about in terms of economic growth, economic development, and within that economic growth and economic development is the impact of climate change, because we are talking about the standard of living of the people, the impact on the people, the impact on the nations. What are the policies that could work for them to address those kind of concerns as well? So we are not looking at just, again, when we talk about economic growth and economic development and social development, we're talking about the role of health, the education, and the development perspective, the climate change. And of course, we are faced in the Pacific, we are faced with almost most of these crucial issues and problems that we need to address as urgently as possible, because we can't say that this can be solved in 10 years time or 12 years time. If you look at the voices of the Pacific from, say, Kiribati and few other nations about the water, the sea level rising, and what about we're not talking about the millions and billions of population, but at least the million population that comes up within the Pacific region is really very important. So Pacific Island countries and the researchers, and I think you and ESCAP relationship are absolutely vital. Those linkages are vital, particularly for the policy outcomes in the Pacific region. And these are the papers which we have brought about in the context of the first publication, a list of publications, particularly when we are talking about the first volume that is being launched today, is looking at some of those perspectives as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so here are some of those policy implications which I found in terms of linking these issues, are basically looking at the articles of climate change. This is the first volume that we are bringing in, volume 31, issue number 1, which has focused on climate change, economic and social development in the case of the Pacific Islands. So if we look at the first paper that talks about urbanization and climate change, we will notice basically that these are these issues that are absolutely vital in terms of examining the perspective here of how urbanization has been impacted. And this study in the case of the Fiji particularly shows that over the period of time, it hasn't been what it was meant to have done for many of these nations as well. And so the impact on the rural areas had led to a larger urbanization within the Fiji, and also talking about this impact of climate change within that particular perspective as well. So overall, urbanization leads to lack of the overcrowding, where the resources in terms of agriculture, food security, manufacturing sector, their jobs and all of that, and also coming to the urbanization and living in squatter settlements, and a perspective of that has also, where there is clean water, sanitation, all those electricity, all of that are required for better standard of living, has a huge impact in terms of climate change as well. So we used to talk about many of those bigger Asian developing countries where the urbanization and climate change has led to larger urbanization in those countries. But those now that we do not just focus on the Asian countries or African nation, but also the same issues are facing the Pacific Island countries as well. So now the urbanization is extending, where the people are moving to save their life, come to the into urban areas, and then living in shanty town, or where the likelihood of proper housing is not there, all those perspectives, and that itself affects the livelihood of the people, including the impact on the climate change as well. So this was one of those perspectives related to the case of Fiji, but nevertheless, it was related to many of the Pacific Islands as well, and the impact and the livelihoods and those perspectives as well. Now, when we talk about multi-hazard early warning system, now this is something which we have talked about, the effect of climate on the economies from a very, very long time. And I think this paper talks about getting this early warning system to the nations much more in advance, as it is important to save the lives of the people as well. So early warning system should be established in many of these island nations, which are then important to address not just the livelihood of the people, but also the country's productive sectors as well, like agriculture, manufacturing, service sector. And with early warning systems that could be in place, will also reduce the cost to the nations. And I think this paper also has been very, very important in explaining these particular issues in the case of the Pacific Islands as well. The third paper in this particular publication, in this particular volume, you will see talks about a paper again on climate change on cocoa plantation. And this study was done by one of these environmental economists, but also linking it to the agriculture sector. And she looks at particularly the impact on the cocoa plantation in the case of Fiji as well. Now, impact of climate, you can see, particularly in the case of Fiji, with sort of floodings and hurricanes and cyclones, and change in all these weather patterns. The production processes are impacted as well. So of course, cocoa being also not just home consumption, but for the export sector also is affected as well. So over a period of time with climate change, the impact of the output of cocoa output is also impacted. And so you can see she talks about the impact in terms of not only in terms of the country's economic income from that particular perspective of cocoa plantation declines, and at the same time the impact it has on the overall economic growth of the nation, but also the livelihood of the people as well is affected in this particular case as well. Now, the fourth paper here talks about renewable energy consumption and environmental sustainability. Now, they have worked basically more in terms of empirical analysis to talk about the importance of renewable energy, how it affects the consumption, but at the same time, over the period of time, how the environmental sustainability is also important as well. Now, given I've already mentioned the impact of climate change in the Pacific Islands have been vast and it's very significant. And so when we talk about this kind of co-integration between renewable energy consumption and environmental sustainability, this will of course play a very important role. Although the case study is done in the case of Fiji, but the reference is also at a bigger perspective in terms of environmental sustainability in the Pacific Islands, and the policy implications are very clear within that journal article, how the governments in the Pacific, particularly for each country, but the Pacific leaders like Forum Islands, Pacific Forum Secretariat's office can take these particular bigger issues to the wider table, international tables, and talk about this particular link between how the renewable energy is so important to it, not bring a huge impact on the consumption pattern of the people and also the nation, but also bring in this environmental sustainability as well. So again, the policy implications are very loud and clear in this particular paper of how these are important as well. Now, when we talk about natural resource extraction and sustainable development, we want it to be in par with such a way that people are benefiting in the long term, the nations are benefiting on this long term, and also we are able to meet some of the sustainable development goal within that perspective as well. So when we talk about the natural resources, island countries have few natural resources within their nations. So we got to look after our natural resources. But at the same time, if we are looking at the extraction at a higher level, say Fiji's gold mine industry and all that sort of perspective and extraction within that, are we able to also make sure that we are able to, our natural resources are intact within the country, but also meet the sustainable development goal of the nations as well. So interestingly, this also has got an analytical perspective of how some of these issues can be addressed. But what I'm also very excited about, many of these papers are, all those papers are, that the policy implications that are being impacted, being noted there, which I think all the governments of the Pacific Islands need to think about, and also our international organizations and also the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat that can take our voices to the bigger, larger table as well. Now, the interesting perspective is the study here related to the aid effectiveness. Now, aid effectiveness, this study was done in not just in the context of the Pacific Island, but also in the case of the larger group of nations as well, in the African nation and the Asian nation as well. Now, aid, foreign aid is the key, important, crucial resource to all developing countries. Now, foreign aid is given by multilateral organizations like World Bank, IMF, UN ESCAP, and all these various World Health Organization, and all those organizations give foreign aid. But how effective is aid for economic growth and also the economic and social development as well? Now, in my good old days, my whole thesis was almost written on aid effectiveness. But interestingly, we had a very interesting paper by a colleague of mine who works in Africa. But he looks at this aid effectiveness in the Pacific and compares this a little bit in terms of the Pacific Islands with the other developing countries as well. So the information that comes out in terms of the policy implications in this particular paper talks basically in terms of how we can improve aid effectiveness for long-term social, economic development of these nations as well. So again, various policies are noted here, and I think this paper again will be very important for most of the international organizations to understand that what are some of these key perspectives that empirically has been analyzed and forms the policy implication in the long-term perspective. It's not even the short run, but the long-term perspective that we can take the nations into using the aid to address this economic and social development of the nations as well. The other paper that talks about COVID-19 and socioeconomic recovery. Now, COVID-19 is so recent. And again, we are not saying that we have finished off with COVID-19 at all. Now, this is something that I think is ongoing. Many of the developing countries are still facing many of the impact of COVID-19, but how do we address the socioeconomic recovery from that as well? Now, this is again a very, very important and interesting paper which talks empirically, but it's sort of more evaluative in terms of addressing the impact of COVID-19 on economic and social development as well. Now, it's not just about social of the housing sector or that, but important is the health sector within this sort of recovery that we need to do. Now, when we look at developing, particularly the island nations, they had very little resources. Yes, they are living in isolation, so the impact must have been a little bit less than many of the Asian countries or African countries. But for the Pacific, even if it's a small proportion of the population that are affected, there still is large enough for the small Pacific Island countries, because we have small group of people, the impact is high. Death rate was not as high as many of the Asian and African countries, but again, that had impact of death rates and impact of lack of resources and capital and health factors and all that, although Australia, New Zealand and others have assisted us, and some of the multinational organizations as well, WHO, UN ESCAP, but resources to reach the island nations are important. So I think these are the issues that are discussed in the COVID-19 and socioeconomic recovery, and ultimately there are some policy implications that are there, which will be very important for all the international organizations to think that we Pacific Islands, although we are living sort of an isolated big ocean, but we cannot be left altogether. So this, I think, is again very important. And the last paper that is coming in this particular issue of the journal is the relationship between education and health. And this is, of course, our human capital factors. No nation can live without a vital human capital. And human capital, the role of education and the role of health will have to come together, not in isolation. It's not just about education, but with better education, we improve our health. With including education and health, we improve our standard of living, we improve our income earning capacity. Particularly health education is absolutely vital, that provides that level of human capital to enhance the well-being of the household and the economic growth of the nation. If we improve the health and education of our people, we improve a better educated labor force. And with better educated labor force, we are able to meet our health factors. We have early warning perspective of whatever social economic problems that which we can face. We can explain to our citizens the importance of renewable energy, better consumption pattern, how we can improve the environmental sustainability as well. We let people participate with that, so that role of education and health will improve the human capital of the nation. And this is the paper which focuses on this kind of issues that are absolutely vital in terms of long-term perspective as well. Thank you. Next slide.
Really move on. I thank you so much for putting together
Okay.
all of this to get a perspective from our Pacific colleagues. So thank you so much for really giving a wonderful overview. May I now request Madam Fekita Maloa Utekamanu, our Minister of Tonga, our dear friend of ESCAP, to give some reflection on this. Madam, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General PIFS, honorable ministers, distinguished colleagues, esteemed academics, researchers, and development practitioners. I am honored to address you on behalf of the government of Tonga. And I must first acknowledge and thank the Executive Secretary of UN ESCAP for the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal. And it is encouraging to see a focus on the theme of sustainable development challenges in the Pacific small island developing states, the role of regional cooperation. This allows me to highlight the pivotal role the journal plays in shaping policy and driving sustainable development in our region. This recent publication examines astutely both triumphs and obstacles our nations are confronted with under extraordinary circumstances. And this is primarily the case for Pacific small island developing states. The issue presents us with a wealth of insightful analysis and data-driven recommendations. The upcoming 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States, SIDS-4, in May is on all our minds. The journal's publication is more than just a timely reminder of the importance of promoting regional collaboration and the need to build strong economies for long-term growth. The journal's findings underscores the importance of firstly enhancing regional integration. The SIDS must leverage our collective strength to overcome geographical isolation and promote economic diversification. Secondly, building resilient economies. Climate change and economic vulnerabilities pose significant threats to SIDS. And thirdly, promoting sustainable development and balancing economic growth with environmental preservation is paramount for SIDS. These insights and recommendations read like a roadmap for SIDS to navigate the challenges they face to achieve sustainable, prosperous futures for all. Tonga, like many Pacific SIDS, face unique vulnerabilities and challenges in achieving inclusive, sustainable development. Climate change, rising sea levels, and natural disasters pose ever more significant threats to our communities, environment, and the economy. In such complex settings and at such rapidly changing times, the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal serves as an instrumental platform to disseminate research and best practices. It informs policy making and helps address challenges. I wish to highlight a further valuable contribution of the journal. It bridges the gap between academia and policymakers, and it is increasingly recognized how important it is to bring these two constituencies together, to work together so that research findings underpin and are translated into practical solutions to make a tangible difference in our communities. The journal's rigorous peer review process ensures the credibility and quality of the research it publishes, making it a trusted source of information for decision makers. As we navigate the often arduous and complex path to SITS4, I hope the journal will continue to play a vital role in informing our discussions and shaping our collective actions. Once again, I thank the Executive Secretary and her editorial team and the contributors to the Asia Pacific Sustainable Development Journal for their dedication to advancing sustainable development in our Pacific region. Your work is invaluable, and we look forward to continuing our partnership in the years to come. Malo pito. Thank you.
Malupito, Madam Fekita, may I now request another dear friend of us, Her Excellency Ms. Leonora Kerekere-Tabua, Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs of Fiji. Madam, floor is for your reflection.
Thank you very much, Sudeep. Excellency, Mr. Puna, distinguished fellow participants or panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I echo Her Excellency's words in acknowledging the work that has been put in to make this journal possible, the first of 2024. And I thank you very much, Professor Gaunder Nisambulinaka, from me in Suva via Bangkok. So basically, I was just taking notes, and this is going to be not even structured at all. But I read that, ongoing fiscal situation of Pacific SIDS and the soaring debt distress, additional financial resources and investment in productive sectors are going to be essential. Having said that, I just want to also encourage and support regional cooperation to address collective sustainable development challenges. And when I talk about sustainable development challenges, we had a very interesting meeting, a side meeting yesterday with Mr. Tata and also his team from the Social Development Division of ESCAP. And they were talking about gender and social development, in particular in Fiji, because they're going to be doing some work with us. And I mentioned to Mr. Tata yesterday and to Chai Chai that one of our social development risks right now is labor mobility within the Pacific. As many of you know, many of our skilled and unskilled people are traveling and moving overseas, basically, thanks to Australia, New Zealand needing more of our people. And that touches on the multi-hazard early warning systems. Now, that might be weather related, but for me, it is also part of this this multi-hazard early warning systems that we as Pacific Island countries need to be very aware of. Because we talk about education being part of sustainable development, but we're having to train up a whole new cadre of people because we're losing doctors, teachers every single day. And the figures I think are correct when I say 80,000 people from Fiji have left the country in the last 18 months. And this is for education, for migration, for work in factories and in farms in Australia, New Zealand. I also note what Professor Gaunder said about sustainable development when it comes to extraction. And one thing that I worry about is deep sea mining and how many of our countries, because of our lack of physical strength, may be to go that way. And that really does worry me. I was at a side meeting yesterday and we were talking about transportation, in particular in Tonga and in Fiji, and how the government of Korea has been really helpful in this space. And what horrified me about that is the amount of cars that Tonga is bringing into the country every year, around 3,000 cars. Where are the old vehicles going to go when this is finished? We talk about a fossil fuel-free Pacific, but for us in the Pacific, we need the fossil fuels because this is how we travel into island. And until we can afford solar sails, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to keep on using these fossil fuels. Regional urbanization that Dr. Gounder spoke about, regional rapid urbanization. The explosion in informal settlements in Fiji in particular poses many threats, not only environmentally, but also to our health, the health of our children. We have a bit of an epidemic going on in rheumatic heart disease, which is exacerbated by overcrowding in informal settlements. So this is one of our multi-hazards that we're going to have to face as a country. And I also, just to close, I don't want to monopolize everyone's time today. Aid, when we come to aid, data from the Economic and Social Commission for ESCAP shows that aid flows to Pacific small island developing states have been declining in recent years. In 2014, total amount of aid received by us was 2.6 billion. By 2023, this amount had fallen to 1.9 billion. So my urge to our development partners is to please come to the islands, come and experience what it's like for us in the islands. I've got so many other issues I wanted to talk about, but data as well. Dr. Gounder talked about how important it is for academia to study. In Fiji, I admit that data has been an issue for us in our recent past, but things are going to change. And we did share this with Mr. Tata from the Social Development Division of ESCAP. I'll leave it at that for now and allow the other speakers to also speak. Inaka.
Inaka, Madam. May I invite Mr. Lawrence Duguman, the First Assistant Secretary, Minister Planning and Monitoring from PNG. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you, distinguished guests and everyone. I think listening from the distinguished guest, just want to give the reflection in terms of the practice, and also I think Professor Gauna just covered us briefly on the three thematic areas: climate change, economic, and social, and with the 12 thematic areas. I think from the perspective in terms of getting the journals to actually align to the Pacific Blue Pacific strategy and into our countries, and actually getting the actual results. I think it's good that in terms of top down and bottom up actions and also reporting. I would say here is that we would like to see the journals actually to reflect in terms of those issues that are really common. I think Fiji mentioned something on the data. So I think much of us in the Pacific, we've been actually getting good support from our donors in terms of grant and even loan and technical assistance, and also our self-government direct investment. But I think in terms of getting the information and statistics out from the regions to really reflect what we're actually doing, I think it's a big challenge. So listening yesterday from the panel at the main hall, the last one of the thematic area was around statistics. So I think we need to just look at our statistics, but I think look at beyond, working closely with the sectors. I think the sectors are doing work, but we are not actually reporting. So I think the findings further from this, some of the, going forward, in the journals, we should look at, what are the things that we should do differently so that we could we could mine more data to actually get evidence for the administrative. Like, let's say for the survey, we have for the census and head counts. I could recall that looking at the population of the Pacific Island themselves, excluding PNG, is 2.3 million. But PNG, I think we'll be having our head count by June. So our population, as of now I'm speaking, is 10.47 million. So put together, it's 12 million plus. So what we are planning for is around people and also planet and oceans. So I think the data for the evidence, I think professors mentioned in terms of the evidence, yes, we would like to collaborate with the academia. But how far do we have to go to get the data is the question. But that's around data. But coming back to the other point in terms of good that the two leaders from Tonga and Fiji are here. So in terms of the leadership dynamics, I think policy making and budget process and implementation and all these things, it is also a political process. So I think to actually have the clear distinction, the fine line between the leaders making policy decision and where does they stop, and where does the bureaucrats and technocrats, take over to implement, the whole the aspirations that we would dream and talk, but we really want to see impact in those three thematic areas. So I think my take on this is we have to, as politicians, listen to our bureaucrats and technocrats and have that harmony to work together, because the development have those dynamics plus they will obviously we acknowledge our development partners, they will be coming into providing their support in terms of where it matters. But I think we have to own the development at our country level, the ownership, strong ownership. I think the third aspect is, I think in terms of the planning aspects, I think some of us are coming from planning, office finance, and at a national level. But we could be good at, planning, but in terms of implementation, I think we need to engage more with our private sector, those processes, because like in terms of Palau and other small island countries, I think we have technologies around the region. We could able to, think more smarter. And how do we address climate change, but, try to bring the technology into rescue the sinking atolls to package that with tourism. I think from my take, I think these are the three areas that I think they will be already, forward-looking thing in terms of the 12 thematic areas that's coming out from the journal, but it's going forward for us, because like, let me say for the SDG, we've reached only 12.6% at the midpoint mark. And I've heard from some of the speakers that from the expert from, the technology innovators, that we can reach that mark by 80%. As Asia Pacific, but why not we do it for Pacific? We are 2.3 million inclusion of Papua New Guinea. What is that we need, to raise our level? So regionally, as we aggregate and do the average over 2026 or 2027, we can at least, have that mark, but it's a challenging those discussions, but I think it goes back to collective effort if individually we do all our actions and, getting the political leverage with, bureaucrats, technocrats, working together, listening to them, and getting all the donors, I think we can. But maybe on the last part, in terms of the technical support from the donors, I think it's good that I will be frank that donors have to listen to the country's needs. Just like most of the time, the donors tell us they talk on behalf of us, what they think that is right for us. But I think you should be listening to us so we can actually, make impact with the small grants that, is coming to the Pacific. Yeah, not only that, but I think concession loan and others from the World Bank, ADB and all this. So I think this is what I would say here. So let's put a practical element to actually take what has been captured in the journal. Let's not that journal be a journal, but what is our take in the journal for each of our countries? So we take back and look at our Highland Mega, and we can actually implement and continues to make progress. Thank you, distinguished guests and everyone. Thank you. Moderator.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary, Ms. Duguman, to really open our eyes and minds and ideas. I think new way we have to really think about as to how to bring that interface. What we have like 10 minutes or so. Yeah, maybe we have about 10. We still have our food, by the way, waiting for us. Maybe we can take about 10 to 12 minutes to have really an open discussion. And many of our colleagues are joining from the Pacific online, including some of the contributors. So colleagues, if you have any reflections, be very succinct, maybe 30 seconds. Very sorry for this little time restrictions, but if you just take time, to share some of your reflections. So over to you. Any of the colleagues from online, please. Please identify yourself and. Do I see some hands up as of now? If not, maybe those who are here, I know we have some colleagues from, I can see our DG from Vanuatu. Mr. Rentus, some reflections, please, from you. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the fruitful discussions, and I do acknowledge the research paper that was presented. Yeah, I think the three thematic areas are totally agreed with Fiji and Papua New Guinea on the key areas that perhaps climate change, economic growth, and looking at regional integration. I've seen in the report, you've mentioned something on one of the key value chains on cocoa production. Basically, I'm not too sure if you've done any sort of work on the Pacific Kava. I think that's, and in terms of the looking at the climate change context, I understand the Pacific Blue Strategy and the Pacific Island Forum recently. We've engaged with 7 island countries to look at the regional cover strategy as being one of the top commodities in the Pacific, where most of the Pacific Island countries have done a lot of production on kava, and how does that reflects with deforestations of a lot of forest within the Pacific itself. So that's the livelihood of the people in the Pacific. On economic growth, basically, I think I totally agree with Fiji. Vanuatu actually has around 16,000 seasonal work in Australia and New Zealand. And currently it is a skills gap in terms of labor shortages in the country in terms of different sectors. I've mentioned the coming back to the value chain on kava production at the Regional Pacific Island Forum meeting we had in Fiji. I think currently China tops the export of our commodity kava. And basically, and I understand there's some discussion on the trade integration aspect on how we could look at market access basically into China. So that's something I would like to put across to support Pacific Island countries and livelihood of the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommaso. Thank you, Tommaso. DG, excellent. I think, may I call our very dear friend, CEO of Pickwick, Mr. Holo Palu. I think, Lottie, you're online. If you don't mind, I see your message, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Lottie, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sudip, for giving me the opportunity to speak in this AUKUS gathering. And kia ora, Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, honorable ministers, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to begin by saying that I could not agree more with the findings of the studies presented by Professor Kaunda. But for my intervention today, let me focus on one point, hoping we'll set some lights towards meeting the objective of this gathering. Regional cooperation. The role of regional cooperation in the region is critical to achieving sustainable development, and that's a fact. And we have to work together to achieve that visions beyond the ongoing talking the walk. We have to start thinking about walking the talk. There is no doubt that everyone in this meeting room knows how important sustainable development is for the Pacific Blue region. And everyone also understands the devastating impact of climate-related disasters on regional and national economic and social development. For me, without serious adaptations through and effective coordination mechanisms, climate change is likely to push more people further into poverty and limit the opportunities for sustainable development and for people to escape from poverty. As a region, we cannot prevent these climate disasters occurring, but we can strengthen our coordination responsibilities in the climate and disaster risk management space, particularly in the area of preparedness. Or in other words, improving coordinations of all supports towards enhancing countries' ability to respond to disaster quickly. That is what I call resilience. Country is able to respond and recover quickly from any disaster. I think going forward, colleagues and excellencies, we should be more focused on some actions that I wanted to share with you all. Increase regional knowledge and understanding of the importance of climate and disaster risk finance to sustainable development, building synergies with all organizations, initiatives, private sectors that work in this space to lessen the overhead costs with more resources going to the country, resilient building agenda. It is more important to leverage on existing mechanisms rather than creating new mechanisms. It is pragmatically sensible to build upon established instruments rather than creating new ones to address sustainable development and lessen the confusion on the ground. Lastly, it's to continue building human capital or the knowledge base of the regions to ensure we have the appropriate skills, talents to close the labor gap if people moves on to better or greener pastures overseas. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak and for your attention.
Malo Peter, CEO, thank you so much. Would like to request very dear friend, Professor Baljit Singh from University of South Pacific, take the floor. Baljit, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me opportunity to say something. Can you hear me?
Yes, Professor, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think one of the major challenges that is being faced in the region that is not being addressed, I think, is the issue of substance abuse. And I think drug is becoming a major issue in most of the Pacific Island country, and it's a big problem, particularly in Fiji. And I think regional cooperation can play a pivotal role in addressing the challenge in the Pacific Island countries by fostering collaboration amongst nations. Resource expertise and best practices can be shared, enabling more comprehensive and coordinated approach to prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation program. Additionally, I think joint effort can enhance cross-border initiatives such as information sharing, law enforcement coordination, capacity building, and thereby strengthening the collective response to this pressing issue. Thank you, Chair.
Pinaka. Professor Baljit, very important point. I think you raise exactly what you're trying to understand, from the ground. We have maybe another one or two observation thoughts from here. Any of our other friends? Sarah? If not, I think may I now request to again, thank you so much to our panelists and all those who shared their thoughts. Really appreciated. So I said our food is still outside, but we like to now close with remarks from Professor Anis Chaudhary, the Emeritus Professor, Western Sydney University, Australia, and the Managing Editor of the APSD Journal. So with great pleasure, may I invite Professor Chaudhary to give the closing remarks.
Thank you, Sudeep. Thank you, Sudeep. I actually acknowledge the presence of distinguished panelists, excellencies, and of course, the Secretary General of the PIPS for gracing this occasion. And as the guest editor was trying to highlight, the importance of academic research and the meeting of the policymakers. Unfortunately, most of the academic journals, as we know, they publish the articles or do research in many occasions with very little policy implications, and there's a big disjoint. So the ESCAP being an organization where we have the analytical work as well as we have capacity support program. So we need to actually, this is the mission of the journal, to bring the policymakers and academic researchers on some common platform. So this is what the journal is trying to do. And I'm really pleased to see so many policymakers today in the room. And we hope that we'll continue to interact with you to identify what are the issues basically that the policymakers think that needs more research. I think if we can get that, then we can pass on that to our network of researchers, academic researchers, to, like, for example, we heard about the mining in the ocean mining, the issues of drug and so on. Of course, the climate change and those are constant issues, but more specific issues rather than broader issues, it can be passed on to us, and then we'll try to pass those issues to the academic researchers. So it's a two-way conversation that we need to establish. So this is a forum whereby we can do that. And especially, so the issue is not closed just with one special issue. Research is continuous, and especially now that hopefully some of the findings can inform the fourth International Conference on Seeds that is in about a month's time, I suppose. So that will be a good achievement for us. Once again, I thank all of you for gracing this occasion and supporting the publication. I also thank all the authors, support staff, especially within the ESCAP, and the guest editor who made it possible to publish this, and my colleagues in the editorial board, especially the colleagues in ESCAP. I'm working remotely from Australia, but without their constant support, it would have been impossible to bring out a quality journal. I thank all my colleagues in ESCAP, as well as the distinguished panelists and excellencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chaudhary, for again sharing the objectives and the way we can take it forward, the work of the journal with our policymakers together. So thank you again for really joining. With that, we close. But without a family photo, I think we'll not be able to get this done. And of course, we have some food outside. So we really would like to have a little bit more discussion together. With that, Vinaka, Kiara, all of the, thank you so much. Thank you. And those who are joining online, maybe request you to have your videos on. We will face and so we can afford together as well. Please.